The impact of the post office scandal on people's lives is really difficult to comprehend. In this video, we hear the story of Tracy Felstead. She was 19 when she was wrongfully convicted of theft and sent to Holloway prison. This is one of the most upsetting stories that you can hear. It contains material which you may find disturbing, including, I'm afraid, discussions of suicide. First, let's hear a little bit about how the shortfall problem developed and escalated in Tracy's case. She was a little bit different. Unlike many, Tracy was an employee and not a sub-postmaster running her own post office.
Problems, some shortfalls.
Yeah, there were a few times where I'd noticed some shortfalls, where I'd had some shortfalls on my till. It was brought to my branch manager's attention. At that stage, I was told to balance the till, and then they would rectify themselves. And it was just, they were minor, they weren't anything drastic.
The book suggests that you noticed another spate of discrepancies with cash adding up at the end of the week to a £1,300 loss. Do you remember that incident?
Yeah, that was, again, I'd given it to the branch manager and actually told them, said what had happened, spoke to them about it, and they said it'll rectify itself.
And here we hear about the process of investigation and interview. A question that sticks in the mind is, how do you explain something you don't understand? This is partly about the reversal of the burden of proof by the post office in the criminal cases.
I'd been pulled to one side by the manager and said that somebody was coming in to interview me today about the discrepancy, which was absolutely fine. I had two guys come in and question me. They asked at the time whether I needed legal representation. I declined. I had nothing to hide. And it kind of escalated from there.
And so these two guys, where were they from?
They were the post office investigators.
Okay. Were they local, or did they come from...
I can't honestly...
You don't know?
No, can't honestly remember. I just, can't remember that.
And what did they ask you, and what did you say?
They asked me where the money had gone, what I'd done with the money. Never at any stage was it, what do you think has happened? Was there any reason for this to happen? It was very much, I was being asked constantly, what have I done with the money? Where has the money gone? I was being accused from day dot.
And what did you say?
There wasn't much I could say, apart from that I don't know where the money's gone. I don't have the money. How do you explain something if you don't understand it yourself?
And did something else then happen involving the post office a little while after the interview with the two post office employees?
Yeah, so then I was put on leave. I was asked to leave the post office. I was suspended while there was further investigation, I was told, taking place. And then it was a few weeks after, I can't even remember the time, really early in the morning. I was staying at my mother-in-law's, and the door, I wasn't actually there, but I had a call. I'd gone out early that day with some friends, and the post office investigators were at my mother-in-law's door with two police officers to take me to the local police station to interview me.
Which was Peckham, I think, wasn't it?
Yes, Peckham Police Station, yes.
And were you taken to Peckham Police Station?
I wasn't there at the time, but I gladly went to Peckham Police Station of my own accord. And at this stage, I then asked for legal representation because obviously going to a police station is, I thought this is serious now.
It had escalated.
It had, yeah, very quickly.
Can you remember, were you interviewed at the police station?
I was.
I don't think you were arrested, were you?
No, I weren't, no.
You were interviewed under caution voluntarily?
Yes, I was interviewed. The police had nothing to do with this. I was interviewed by the same two investigating officers from the post office.
And by the same two, you mean the ones
The
from
ones from
a
the
few weeks
previous
before?
interview, yes.
What was the interview like?
It was horrendous. The only way I could explain it is that I felt bullied. There was no, I was a young girl, I was in a police station. I couldn't justify where this money had gone because I didn't know where the money had gone. I couldn't explain anything. I was just constantly being asked, did you pay for your family to go on holiday? What did you spend the money on? And it just kept going. And then in the end, my solicitor said, just say no comment because they're not asking questions. They're just interrogating me.
When the Court of Appeal came to look at the matter all those years later in April 2021 in its judgment, the Court of Appeal records that your record of interview says that you were asked questions including, can you demonstrate how you did not steal the money?
Yes.
Do you remember those kind of questions?
Yes.
And you were asked whether you could satisfy the officers that you didn't have responsibility for the £11,000 that was said to be missing.
Yes.
And so you were being asked to prove how you had not committed a crime.
Yes.
Is that how the interview went?
Yes. Yes, very much so. They had access to my bank accounts. They had access to my home. They never ever came to my home or searched my home. But they looked for all the bank accounts. There was no money to find because there was no money there.
And now I'm afraid we get into the more difficult parts of the evidence. How does a teenager respond to being accused of theft?
Were you, did your suspension continue?
Yes, and then I was sacked by the post office and then prosecuted.
And can you remember the offences for which you were prosecuted?
Yes, I can.
And what were they?
2 counts of false accounting and theft.
And did something happen when you were charged with those concerning your health?
Yes.
Now, do you mind me asking about it?
No, it's fine.
You tell us what happened.
I tried to kill myself.
Was that because you'd been charged with a criminal offence you hadn't committed?
Yes, it was. I couldn't defend myself. I couldn't explain what had happened.
How many times did you try?
Twice.
Was that through taking overdoses?
Yes, it was.
You weren't successful in your attempts.
No.
Was there a consequence of that, though, in terms of what care you had to receive?
Yeah, I wasn't trusted by my family to be left alone. It had a huge impact on everything, to be fair. I'd missed a family, a really close family friend's, a really close friend's wedding. I had to go to the church, and then in the evening, if I hadn't have gone to, my family had sectioned me.
So were you admitted to a secure psychiatric facility?
Yes, I was.
Was that the unit at the Princess Royal Hospital in Bromley?
Yes, it was.
And how long were you kept in the secure unit?
I can't remember. It was don't know whether it was a few days or a week. I can't honestly remember, but it wasn't pleasant.
Were you given psychotherapy treatment?
Yes, I was, and a lot of medication.
Before this, had you been on medication?
I had been on medication for low mood, anxiety, and just the whole general process that I'd gone through. But yeah, the medication started to be upped.
So that was GP prescribed medication before the suicide attempts, and then it was upped when you were in the secure facility. Yes. Yeah. Did the treatment that you received, in particular the psychotherapy, eventually work? Enough to get you out?
Yeah, enough to get me home. But again, I was, my family watched, but we were still going through this cycle of prosecution from the post office at this stage.
Next, we hear about Tracy's trial. There are clearly issues around disclosure and the handling of expert evidence. As we can hear, it doesn't go well.
So you had to attend the magistrate's court, is that right?
Yes, I did.
And did you plead guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
And was the case sent off to the Kingston Crown Court?
Yes, it was.
And what happened at the trial?
At the trial, I tried to defend myself as much as I possibly could. It was very much from day one that the post office were adamant that I'd taken the money. And there was you weren't given an opportunity to explain or even try and explain how something could have gone wrong, or you just had no idea. I remember, well, it actually, since our convictions were overturned last year, a forensic accountant actually got in touch, who was actually hired at my trial to come to give a forensic account of my case at the court. He was never called up, but he came forward last year to say that actually when he had some disquiet about my case at that time, he sat in a room with Fujitsu and the post office and had asked for certain documentation to be provided. He was then told that that would cost £20,000. Around.
Would cost who £20,000?
It would cost us, me, my legal team, £20,000 to get that documentation. We would have to pay the post office and Fujitsu to get that documentation, and that wasn't possible. That only came to light to me. That was only brought to my attention last year when Mr. Turner came forward.
What was his full name?
Michael Turner.
Can you remember why he wasn't called at your trial?
No. He said that he was very surprised when he heard that from the evidence that was submitted that I'd been found guilty.
What was your defence?
There wasn't much of a defence. I didn't steal the money. It was, how can you prove that, that you haven't stolen anything, but at the same time I hadn't been investigated as to where there was any money. No money was found.
At that stage, was there any examination of the way the Horizon system worked in the course of your trial?
No.
Did you know at that stage that there was a potential issue with the reliability of how the Horizon system worked?
No.
And was there any evidence called about how the Horizon system worked in your trial?
No.
I think you were found guilty by a majority.
Yes.
And were you sentenced immediately, or was it put off to another day?
No, I was allowed home, and I was to be sentenced after a psychiatric report.
Okay.
So Tracy is convicted and sent to prison. She describes her experiences leading up to sentencing.
Did you know that you were going to be sent to prison?
I had an idea. I was told by my legal team that it was a possibility. But at the same time, my family had been told that if they were to pay the £11,500 back to the post office, that I wouldn't get a custodial sentence.
And so what happened in the period between being convicted and sentenced, so far as the £11,500 was concerned?
My family paid the £11,500, and it was, we're not from a family of money, so it was paid from a number of family members clubbing together.
And did that include your, I think, then fiance?
Yes, well, not my fiance. It was my mother-in-law.
I see.
My grandmother, my uncle, my parents had to club together to get the £11,500 to pay the post office, which they paid, which I was really angry about.
Why were you angry?
Because I hadn't stolen any money. So why am I paying something that I haven't stolen?
But they paid the money and it was handed over to the post office and accepted.
It was, and then the day of sentencing, the judge accused me of stealing from old age pensioners.
Was this in the judge's sentencing remarks?
Yes, yes. I'd stolen from old age pensioners, and that because I showed no remorse, I wouldn't say sorry. I was sentenced to 6 months in prison.
Were you asked to apologise?
Yes, and I refused to apologise for something I hadn't done.
Were you escorted from court in handcuffs?
I was.
Where were you taken?
I was taken down to the holding cells, and I was actually placed in a room downstairs, and then I was allowed to see my barrister. That was it, who brought a note down from my family.
And here counsel asks this question. This might sound like a really odd question. What was Holloway Prison like?
And then I was taken to Holloway Prison.
This may sound like a really odd question. What was Holloway Prison like?
Your worst nightmare. It was horrible. It wasn't a place for a young girl.
Just remind us how old you were.
90. I was a teenager.
Why was it horrible?
Because I shouldn't have been there. I hadn't done anything wrong. There were things that I saw, I experienced, that nobody should go through.
One of your duties was to deliver hot drinks around the wings. Is that right?
Yes.
And was there an occasion where you saw something particularly horrific?
Yes, there was. I saw a young girl hanging in the cell.
Okay, and this may seem like a really odd question. How did the experience of, I think, 3 months in Holloway you spent in the end affect your mental health?
It hasn't stopped. I have intense therapy to try and get over what I've been through, to deal with the stresses, the feelings, the flashbacks, the dreams, the nightmares.
In the 20-odd years since your release, has it continued, i.e. being accused of a crime, convicted of a crime that you didn't commit, and being sent to prison for 6 months, continue to affect your mental health?
Yes, it has. And I think it will always affect me.
Tracy's conviction was eventually quashed in 2021. You might think that the cloud lifted then, but here we hear Tracy's story about afterwards.
Winding forwards to 2021, your conviction was quashed by the Court of Appeal on 2 grounds. Looking back over that 20-year period between conviction, which I think was in June 2002, to April 2021, that nearly 20-year period of your life, what was it like to live it?
It was horrible. In the space of 20 minutes, I had 3 judges saying that 20 years of my life basically was erased. It was for nothing. I'd gone through everything for nothing. I was a child.
What would you like to happen now?
I'd like for somebody to be held accountable. It's not just one person. There's not just one person that knew what was going on here. Somebody needs to be held accountable. I want them to sit here and feel what we feel. We're having to do this again. We're having to tell our stories over and over. Do they have children? How would they feel if it was their daughter? My 15-year-old son said to me last week that he's glad that he doesn't have the same surname as me. He's so good. He sits in school and he hears people talking. He sees stuff in his school. They have TVs that project the news. He's happy that he doesn't have the same surname as me.
Ms. Felstead, I've asked you lots of questions. Is there anything that you want to say to the chair of the inquiry that we haven't looked at so far?
No, we just need answers.
Thank you for listening.